Thank you, and thank everybody. Let me first thank AFCEA, both international and local, for putting on another great event. I also want to take a moment and recognize and thank the sponsors. Many of you heard me speak before. I do think the relationship between our industry partners and the DoD has to continue to get stronger, and we've got to continue to exploit that. The other thing I want to mention this morning, in case some people did not see it, today it was announced Admiral Grace Hopper is going to receive the Presidential Freedom Award. For those of you who do not know, she has to be seen as one of the early founders of modern IT cyber. I was privileged enough to meet her a couple times, and I will tell you, even in her final days, she never lost that passion and would be happy to talk to you for hours about cyber, cobalt, yes, IT, but one of the great leaders in IT. So if you don't know about her, you should go look her up, read about it, and just remember that because of her and some others, we are where we are today with the technology. Now, some of you have been to my speeches before, and I heard that. Oh, I'm sorry. They're really not that good. So, ground rules. My speeches are always interactive, whether you want them to be or not. So I note today that we have a group of ROTC candidates, or cadets, and we have some high school cadets. You are all going to get to ask questions today, whether you want it to or not. You are our future leaders, and you should be thinking about some stuff here today. I do think the theme of this conference, increasing power through cyber, has everything right. I see a lot of articles that say, we've got to increase the power of cyber. Cyber's got to get more powerful. Cyber isn't by itself an outcome. The other thing that's not an outcome by itself is security, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So I'm going to talk a little bit, and then we're going to take questions. And because I like disrupting things, I'm going to take some of the questions off the app, but then I'm just going to walk in and ask questions. And you all get to ask me questions. So it will be interactive. If I thought of one word today that comes back to me when I pulse what's going on, it probably is uncertainty. I don't think that should surprise us in the IT cyber communications world. Anybody who's looking for complete certainty in that business probably shouldn't be in that business. The changes that are going to continue to happen in the IT cyber comms world are going to continue to accelerate. Things will be valuable for less time, and that both means technology, software, and processes. They're all going to have to continue to change faster. That's the certainty, that things will continue to change. Now, within some strategic sets, what do I think from a DoD, CIO, and from a DoD perspective is going to continue? If you haven't seen it, and there's some summaries of it out in the news this morning, Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General Goldstein, wrote a very nice article about what has to happen. And the theme of it is this. If we're going to get the most out of our communications in cyber, it's not just the technology that's going to get us there. It's changing the culture of our thought. It's being able to think from the beginning that whatever we do in our cyber IT environment, it's got to think joint, international, and I'm adding another I called industry. That is the new 3 I's. You've got to think about that because industry is going to help power the innovation we need. And there's nothing wrong with that. Actually, it's where we want to be. Using industry to help power that innovation is going to drop the cost and let us innovate faster. That means, however, that us on the DoD side of this have to be willing to accept the innovation faster. What do we have to change to do that? Well, the first thing we should do is throw out the word requirements. Ban the word. It's a terrible word. You shouldn't talk in DoD about requirements. You should talk about outcome and capabilities. We ought to be telling industry, I will tell you one thing I want right now. You got my phone? I'll use yours. Yours will work. I want a device this big that will let me take advantage of wireless, wired, satellite, and radio, that will be unclassed, secret, encrypted, not encrypted, and using classified and unclassified specifications and applications on one device, and I want it for Christmas. Now, we're all laughing. My own guess is industry is going to come close to meeting that goal for me, and we're going to look at it. I was with my colleague from the UK. Some of you know Mike Stone. He's my counterpart. They are already experimenting with something they call a shapeshifter. It's a phone capable of IP connection that they are experimenting that you can do. And they have 3 networks. They have what they call OpenNet, Restricted Net, and then SIPR. And they are experimenting right now to be able to do those things on that one device. That's coming. But that's an outcome. Notice I didn't tell you I want, all the specs around it like we do. I don't want to do that. That's one thing we have to change. The other thing I think that both of us have to change, this is industry and DoD, is be willing to talk more openly. That has to be both ways. Industry, just like we in DoD, have to be willing to partner more. Industry has to partner more. There are very few companies that are going to bring the total best-of-breed solutions for any of these capabilities by themselves. I need industry to partner, just like I'm having to partner, to bring me the best answers. And one of the challenges I'm going to throw out to industry, your partnerships just can't be inside the U.S. You think about a couple things that are common. If I was, say, in the Canadian government, and I wanted some partnership, you think I might want a Canadian company, if I was going to do a joint partnership, to be in that mix and maybe share a little bit in that profit? I think that's a fair thing to ask. So industry, you are going to have to look at how you do some international partnerships and bring those to the table as we do best-of-breed solutions. That has to happen. That's, if you're going to ask me where some certainty that money will go, it will go to solutions that can do that. It will go to solutions that are flexible from the beginning. It's an easy thing to say that just means they're all going to be software-based. It's got to go beyond that. Solutions today have to be built from the beginning knowing they have a limited, and in some cases, a really limited use life. It's going to change fast. You know that we're doing my office sponsors, the Joint Regional Security Stacks and the MPA, the Mission Partner Environment. When we first started Mission Partner Environment, we had an architecture that I thought was fairly advanced, was taking the best of how you build, but it was kind of what I would call a hard architecture using a little more hardware. What do you think we're doing with that architecture today? Who am I going to pick on first? You looked up, sorry. What do you think that architecture might look like today? What do you think is the most common thing? What is the common word you hear in IT today? Computers, anything. Say cloud. Cloud, brilliant answer. We're going to go, but my point being, I had to scrap. I'd be willing, we'd spent some money to throw away the plan. The MP architecture today is going to be cloud-based. We had to throw away, scrap what we had done, and go to a cloud. You've got to be willing, in my business, I'll use this word, you've got to be willing to kill stuff. And you got to kill it at the right time. Good for us that we're good at killing some things. Bad that we have not been good at killing programs when they finally hit obsolescence. We've got to get better at that. Industry's going to have to get better at that too. Companies that refuse to change what they're marketing will not be in business. It was interesting predictions, a couple of them by some of the really good futurists, who basically say the companies today that make up the Fortune 100, 25% of those will be gone in 10 years. That's an interesting and a little bit of a daunting prognosis. But if you looked at what are the top companies today, and you took that back 10 years, major changes at the top. Who's at the top today? It's a pretty easy question for this group. Who are some of the top companies today? Dell, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they all have a couple things in common there. They're in our business. Now, that ought to tell us that we're sitting in a pretty good position. You look at the companies that are really doing well, have lots of money, lots of cash. They're in our business lane. How do we keep that happening? How do we take and use cyber to maximize the power that we have? Part of that culture that has to change is also the way we think about security. So some of you heard me say this before. How many of you think that you cannot secure all of our networks? Get your hands up, be proud. Okay, you're all wrong. I can absolutely secure, I can have Jeannie say, I can say, Jeannie, tell them I want all the networks secured. 15 minutes later, they will all be secure. Now, those of you who said, raise your hands. How many of you think when I do that we'll have any use for them? Yeah, they'll all be secure, but we won't be doing anything on them. That kind of defeats the purpose. We've got to think about that. Too often, we have restricted the use of our networks and technology, and we forgot that there's really one descriptive person that should be making that decision about what risk I'm going to take. Who is that? You looked up. Who is it? Who do you think? Who makes decisions for you? And what's your title? Oh, him. What's your title?
Terry, the Deputy G6 for USERPAC, sir.
Oh, there you go.
The commander, though, is the right answer.
It is. It is. But, in a way, isn't the 6 really in charge? The commander, the operational commander, whether it's a business operation or war operation, has got to be the person that takes the risk. We continue to do some things with security that don't make sense. So a couple things that we are going to look at doing. Some of you know, against some of the forces of darkness, we have decided we're getting rid of the CAC card. We will be off the CAC card in 2 years. Everybody says, well, why is that such a big deal? It's a big deal because the whole CAC infrastructure limits what we can do to get information to people. And frankly, it makes me have to adapt security measures sometimes that aren't all that secure. It's moving with the rest of the world. So one of the other things that I've asked for Christmas is I want a process coupled with technology that gives me 10-factor security and uses no add-on devices. And guess what? When I go back, I'm going to evaluate 4 proposals from 4 groups that think they can meet that. And I wouldn't be seeing the proposals, because the group that looked at that, if they weren't pretty close. That's doable today with today's technology. It is absolutely doable. That means we've got to look at some things differently in terms of security. Security's got to be around the mission, and not everything has to be at the same level. I don't know why we have trouble getting that through our heads, but we do. Not everything. Not everything on SIPR has to be the same level. There are some secrets that are more secret than others. I think somebody wrote a book about that. particularly in the unclassed. There's going to be straight unclassed, and then I do like, frankly, the category that many of the Five Eyes use that we don't, which is they have unclassed and they have a restricted unclassed. We need to be thinking about that. The good news out here, where's Randy? Randy has been thinking greatly about that, and we're really happy with some of the work Randy and Paycom and PacFleet and this team have been putting together. Kathy here, they have done great work, and we're going to model some of that for other places in the world. Security's got to be mission-based. I'll tell you one last dumb story about security. So in a much earlier time, when I could still walk without the limp, yes, I was part of an Army experiment that decided we were going to encrypt the squad-level radios. And back then, they were not all that reliable sometimes anyway. And the problem with the encryption is, so you use that radio if you're, so I'll go a little bit. Here's another thing you can write down. It's an absolute truth. If the threat can put accurate small arms fire into your position, they absolutely know where you are. That's a fact. I know it surprises a lot of people, but that is true. At that point, it might be okay to say in the open, medic. They probably know that. If you encrypt that and the encryption takes a long delay, you have to change what you're calling for from medic to something else. The something else isn't good. Mission and security have to be matched. We've got to do better. So you're going to see some new policy coming out that's going to change some of the ways we're doing that. For industry, I released on the 18th a updated, frankly, more directive Reciprocity Memo. Reciprocity for everybody here is that if the Air Force has gone and tested something and said it's okay, the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, should all other DOD, we should be accepting that, not retesting it. There was some difference of interpretation in that memo, so I have closed that. So the new rules go like this. You will default to using reciprocity. If you think you have a reason that you can't use reciprocity, you will request a waiver from my office. I have pulled all that authority back up to the DOD level. And we will grant some of those, but only when it makes mission sense. And that there's a real reason to doubt that there was something or you've got a special occasion. So I've heard the complaints from industry, and I think they were valid. We're also going to change some of the board structure that goes around how we approve it. The approval lines are getting way too long on both accreditation and authority to operate. And that's hurting mission. You know, yes, I'm glad that helps industry. But my real reason for doing that is when I hear from the COCOMs and commanders that they can't get the equipment and the solutions they need because it's taking us too long, we're going to shorten that some more. We brought it down a little bit. We're going to bring it down a little more. I think with that, I will shut up and take questions from all of you. So who's got the app? Is it going to pop up right there? Okay. We're going to give 2 seconds, and then the front row, you're in trouble.
Well, it's early in the transition after the recent presidential election. Do you anticipate changes in the acquisition process? Do you see a stronger opportunity for industry and government relations?
Okay, I'm going to answer these, but I think the election had nothing to do with it. Do I think we're going to make changes in acquisition? I think those changes were planned and they will continue. Do I see the opportunity for stronger industry and government relations? Absolutely. And again, I don't think that was election dependent. I think that's something that this group and all of what we represent and all of who we represent understand that has to happen. You know, if you look at Frank Kendall's latest changes to Buying Power 3.0, they're about that. We have stood up the DIUX with special contract authority. I can now have an innovation contract in place doing something under 60 days. And if that pans out, we can actually take that into a production contract. So I think those things are working. Now, here's what industry's got to do, though. You've got to come in a little better than you have been sometimes with facts. If we're going to move that fast, you've got to have some better technical presentations of the data. And not, this gets, everybody thinks it's awkward and I shouldn't have this conversation. I'm going to have it. Industry is a partner, and you guys know that. I believe it. I have preached that since I was the Don CIO. So when I tell you this, it's because I want everybody to get better. Many of the presentations I see that tell me things are going to be good are PowerPoint deep. And sometimes it's PowerPoint deep because, frankly, you apparently don't know how to build presentations. You have better answers, but you don't get them in. Some of you know that I will read email, particularly if you send me an email that has a real business case on it about why I should talk to you. I'm going to tell you, about 60% of that email, I read it about the first paragraph and a half, and it goes in the trash. Because it didn't say anything but, hi, I'm Acme, and you should buy me. Not going to get my attention by saying, hi, I'm Acme, you should buy me. What do you do for me? I ask you to apply the same things you would do if you're going to go buy something. If you're going to acquire a company, do you have some due diligence you do? Do you look at that? Do the same thing. And some of you are getting very, very good at that, and I appreciate it. I need more of you to get into that game. Okay? What else?
Can you make 60 to 90 days a standard response time for big RFPs, vice 30 days?
I can't, but I'll take that back. That's not my authority to do. But I will look at that. I would have to understand, and I'm sure Frank Kendall, we've talked about this, will want to understand the basis for all that. My own guess is what Frank would answer, and please, I'm guessing, is that he would say no, but what I can do is make it the appropriate amount of time for whatever that some of them don't need that long. Some of them might need longer. And again, it's about stopping this business of, here's the standard in all these, and it applies to everything. We do have to tailor standards in acquisition and security to what? The mission, the outcome, the capability that we want. Okay, who's got a question they didn't text?
Actually, two. Can you speak to the issue of compliance versus security?
I can. The question is, can I speak to the issue of compliance versus security? Okay, I got to contain myself on this answer. I'm not going to do that. Compliance for compliance state is a complete waste of time, money, and mission dollars. Okay? Compliance has to be tied to improving the security in the mission. I will freely admit there are places where we still have compliance that actually, the way we are executing it now doesn't make sense. And that doesn't mean you throw out all compliance. It means you review it. And again, it's not going to be, and this is the culture that I'm trying to get everybody to think about, it's not going to be one stop and one package for everything. There's some compliance that plays a role in some missions that wouldn't in others. And we've got to recognize that. So what we are trying to do is two things. Last year, for the first time, we wrote our cloud instruction with the complete help of industry. We brought in some people, I see some of them here, that helped me write the cloud policy, and help my staff build that cloud policy. We are going to continue that technique, where we put it up, bring in, and we have dialogue. Now, that doesn't mean that everything that industry wants in there will be put into the document. What it means is when we look at it and you look at it and it makes sense for all of us, government too, that's what we'll look at. But here's maybe the biggest change. I didn't print the cloud instruction on paper except for one copy because we had to. Everything else is electronic because guess what? What do you think has to happen with those instructions? How long does an instruction generally last? Doug, you know I'm going to pick on you. So, Doug, how long does and if you don't have the answer, I'm going right here.
Well, sometimes they last forever.
That is the answer. Instructions apparently do last forever. They never die. That's not probably going to work if you believe anything I've said before here. So how do we get instructions and guidance that is more agile and adaptive. We are working on how to do that. It has to happen. I hope that answered your question. You have one more? Okay, go ahead.
Can you talk about quantum physics versus the obsolescence of radio wave?
I could, but this is probably not the forum to do that. All I'll say is this. Quantum, past quantum, is probably all going to get here faster than we think. I have complete faith that the really smart people in technology, that will not, however, make radio waves obsolete. Nah, not happening. What it will do is give us better capacity and better ways to use those radio waves. You could bet money on that. What else? Everybody is happy in their work.
There's a bureaucratic culture in DoD not to go fast. With that in mind, when can we realistically see your Christmas presents come to fruition?
So I want to do two things. You see where you said DOD there? There's a bureaucratic culture in all big organizations. Industry, DOD, I don't care what you are. Now, some of that serves us well. Sometimes that serves us well, because it does check sometimes some rash movements. I 100% agree we're on the wrong side of checking right now. We've got to go faster. I think you will see pilots on replacement of the smart card right after Christmas. I think you will see some of the changes in security interpretation and guidance in the end of January. And I think you could take both of those safely to the bank. All right, I got one in the back here.
Sir, just quickly, do you see, I'm glad you raised the idea of reciprocity. I think it's probably one of the biggest things that impacts everyone in the room today. The question I have is specifically around, do you see the authority to operate and the idea of reciprocity taking over from FIPS and common criteria, especially as we just heard the conversation
Okay.
around
Yeah. Let me answer that question this way. Do I think these discussions replace common criteria? No. I think these discussions are going to inform how we continue to adapt what common criteria is. Part of the problem is the common criteria that was written 5 years ago is not the common criteria today. Can't last that long. So how do we adapt that? I do think that DOD will lead forward in some of this, but that rapidly, I talk a lot to Tony Scott, the federal CIO. Tony, unbelievable partner. He is lockstep at trying to drive some of these same things into the federal government. And I don't think that's election dependent. I think that people understand that has to happen across the board. So I think you will see some of that happening across the board. I think you'll see us adapt some different ways of putting out policy and guidance that are a little more flexible. And frankly, this is a tough one. We certainly want to move into a more enterprise environment. We also want to move into a more agile environment. Now, I think it's fair to say that's not always been the way we've done things. If I'm in the service, and I have been at the service level, and at certain times may be true that as the Department of Navy CIO, I might not have always been a fan of the DoD CIO enterprise solutions. I think that is God's way of giving me this job to pay for some sins. You got to get the balance between agility and enterprise right. But if we'll do the other things I've talked about in the culture, that will follow. If you can lay out the right mission and business arguments for the moves and base it around facts, my guess is that we'll get this done faster. I do believe that. What else? Let me go way in. I'll get to you in a minute. His hand went up. We timed it. We lost by about 1/10 of a second. Yes.
You touched on the cloud, but before I could get the question to you, we were finished. And I just want to know, do you see the DoD adopting a multi-cloud strategy, like, for example, AWS, Azure, and maybe a DoD private cloud? And if so, what apps do you see residing in what particular area?
I did plant the question. I'm sorry. He is a paid participant. No, he's not. Great question. So the question basically is this. Do I see DoD using various cloud solutions to maybe use Azure as one example, do something, but partner it with other clouds? Where's my other planted? I don't have another one, Mark. So Mark here's from Amazon. I'm sure we've got Azure in the room, other clouds. We've got Dell in the room, right? The answer is yes. We would be completely stupid if we didn't take advantage of what I call the hybrid cloud environment. So my vision says we're going to have a cloud environment goes like this. We will have an on-prem cloud that provides DoD some set of basic enterprise services. You could think email, chat, maybe video, file share, those things. And they will be modeled after commercial, and it will probably be in partnership with a commercial provider, but it'll be on-prem, where in my language, C2 is completely with the government. Then we're going to have some other things. So we're going to need some DevOps clouds. How do I do development? Today, the ability to stand up in an elastic way, that cloud structure is phenomenal in today's industry. I would be dumb not to do that. We've got you can talk to the right representatives that are doing that here. They've got booths out there. We need to take advantage of that. Some of that will be in commercial facilities. Some of that will be in commercial facilities that look an awful lot like government facilities from the outside and from the security wrapped around it. I am perfectly convinced that industry today is willing and will, if we give them the right capabilities, build secure environments that we can do. It would not surprise me, and now I'm speculating, so not promising, but it would not surprise me that we saw some type of commercial environment that was maybe a federal environment, that all the federal agencies could use that environment, whether it was for DevOps or storage or something in between. Application hosting, maybe. One of the things that gets a little amusing to me sometimes is DoD has to talk to the public. In some cases, I have to do business in a transactional way with the public. Think Transcom. Transcom, Transportation Command, deals mostly with the public. Airlines, rail lines, freight, shipping, all of that good stuff. If I stood something up and said we could only do that in this environment, that might cause a small problem to their mission. How do I do the Transcom mission secure but able to get to everybody? That's going to take a different cloud environment than just saying it's an on-prem protected entirely by us. Got to be different. So we're going to use, I got asked a couple times, what's the DoD cloud environment going to be? And I said, yes. It's got to take advantage. It's back to the theme of this speech. You've got to be able to adapt. One model, DoD, you've all heard me say this, where is DoD in the Fortune 100? Somebody's got to know the answer to this one. I've said it enough times. Yes? I had such high hopes. What's before one? What's before one? No, that's after one. Yeah. Let's see, let's not use that mathematician. Thank you for letting me have fun. DoD, if you count one, is Fortune 0. We are Fortune 0, by any measure you want. Some clouds actually adopt to business models. Well, if that makes sense, and I'm in that business, and there are many businesses we're in, and frankly, we haven't yet come up with one we're not in a fairly large level. Again, if I'm talking about a business mission, that's just as important as the war mission. We ought to match my applications, my IT environment, to what makes sense for those missions, which means your overall enterprise environment has got to be flexible enough to handle all of that. That's not an easy task, but it is where we have to go. What other questions? Oh, I'm sorry. I did forget.
We have two young ROTC Marines here.
Yep.
today to be able to, social media tools to allow them to collaborate without boundaries. So when they join the Marines, are they going to be able to have those types of tools that will allow them to communicate with or collaborate without boundaries across all the forces?
No, yes, and sometimes. And I think, again, that's the answer that's got to be correct. Are we always going to be able to use social media without boundaries? No. That's just not going to happen. In certain environments, it shouldn't. Should I have an environment, though, that the Marines in a completely unclassed arena want to be able to do that? Yes. That's what we'll aim for. But in those restricted and higher level units, we're not going to be able to have unrestricted access. So I know the other question you wanted to ask, where am I with bring your own device? Here's what's going to happen. I'm not going to call it a bring your own device policy. I'm going to call it the use your own device policy. You don't have to bring one. If you have one and you want to use it, we're going to let you in some areas. We just completed inside the Pentagon the first phase of our wireless build. Now, the wireless build, phase 1, is a more restrictive piece. You can get on it. You have to be sponsored by somebody. It was really built because many times, many of the industry partners want to come in. They want to show me stuff as they should be able to in a more advanced way using technology. We did not want to do that in the main network, so we've opened a wireless network to do that. Phase 2 of that will truly be an open guest network. That open guest network, you have your device, you could connect to it, and you'd be able to do normal things. We are also working on being able to have, like, email delivered to any device. I think that's doable with the right security framework on our end. Will every application be accessible through your own device? No, not going to happen. Not for a long time. Just too complicated in the security business to do that. And that is about mission. There are some things we don't want to do. And sometimes it will depend on where you are at. There are certain places in the world we're not going to let that happen. And that's prudent of us not to do that. So you're going to see better tools. And I would ask you, as you move forward, be demanding customers. So how many people here are with everybody who's a cadet, high school, just stand up a minute. If you're ROTC, you're a cadet, you guys have a responsibility. Your responsibility is to be demanding customers, but also to learn the environment you're coming in. We have a responsibility to protect that data, but we also have a responsibility to make the data accessible to two groups. All of us in the mission sense, and you got to do that. But we also have a responsibility where we can to open our data that doesn't portray any mission stuff to the rest of the people of the United States. So you got to be demanding customers from the day you start about what tools you need, understanding and learning about the environment. Thank you. What else? And who's keeping time? Okay. Yep, coming right here.
Okay. Question is, you talked a lot about technology, a lot about processes, and so on and so forth. Can you discuss a little bit about the forces, like cyber mission forces, and we're fielding new technologies, new capabilities, all these new processes. How are we going about partnering with industry to speed the training of our cyber mission forces, because they seem to always be lagging?
So here's an interesting question. So I can certainly, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing to speed up the training, but I'm going to offer this. We are probably never going to match the training to the speed of the environment. Speed of the environment, but what we've got to do is match, and I think this is a change we really have to adopt, and people have had this argument for years, but I do think this environment is making it clear. We have to educate the cyber force, not so much train them. We've got to get them the right analytical tool sets and the right analytical mindset, train them on that. Give them enough of the details about the operational environment, about the hardware, so they can think through not just what they're being attacked with, but they also can be thinking, what's next, so we beat the guys to the what's next. We are doing some of that. We're doing some interesting things that somebody's going to ask me to elaborate on. I'm going to tell you now I can't. We're doing some interesting things with the IBM Watson. We are doing some other interesting things with places I cannot know in the world of AI. And how do you couple that? How do you improve the learning processes? How do you build a system that the cyber team can call on that's not a normal, like go to a database. It's a thinking system that works with them to solve the problems. They're all doable today. And we are working on building those systems. In addition, you will see a couple more, maybe mundane, but I think critically important things. Thanks to some people, and some of them are in the room here today, we've gotten some legislation that allows us to start a cyber-accepted workforce. So where is Secretary Grimes? Thank you for your help. We have that today. We will begin using and hiring people, which gives us the ability to move beyond the normal processes and hire some of the people that we need to bring into the cyber workforce. That will help. We are also seeing, if you looked at the Secretary's force of the future, he wants to look at different on and off ramps. So how do we take somebody from the military or civilian, put them in industry for a while, bring them back, put them back, and keep that flow? Now, how many of you think that's new? I'm glad that no one raised their hand. That is something that I think we lost the art on a little bit. If you read your history, that's one of the things that really did help us win the Second World War, was the ability to have that flow. You'll see that we've got a program going on right now where for the first time, because we've done this in the past with military, but for the first time, I have a number of civilians embedded with industry and selected foreign partners. They've become part of their staff, and I have on the DoD global staff, some of the services, some of the places, industry people who are actually on the staff. They're not what you think of, where you get an embedded contractor. No, they are truly on the staff. And we are working with some companies that are in the room today to expand that and bring more exchange. That, to me, is one of the most important programs that I want to make sure we protect and goes forward. That exchange is done some remarkable things for us. You already had two. That would be unfair.
Put me up. We've got one from the text messaging. What are your thoughts on how to safeguard the enterprise from the insider threat?
I'm going to say this first, and I hope no one reports that Halvorsen said he was not worried about insider threat. I'm worried about it. But we have a culture, and I worry about this too. Sometimes the work on insider threat can undermine what this culture is about. And we got to be careful here. We've been very lucky. We've had some insider threats, yes, and they've caused some really harm. But if you look at the history and what we've had, by any number in math, it'd be a small percentage. So I would just say, yes, there's technology. We're going to employ that to look at insider threat. But probably the biggest, and this is where I say you have to be so careful with the culture, probably the biggest thing you could do with insider threat is educate the entire workforce. Without getting into specifics, I can tell you most insider threat probably could have been identified if the individuals working around the person had just paid attention to the things that we said you should pay attention to. Now, I say caution. One of the things that powers our workforce and makes, and I'm going to say it, makes this country very different from other places in the world is the freedom and that our people don't believe they're always being watched. And we just have to be careful we balance the two. Technology is going to help. I think education, and we are certainly within DoD upping our education of what that means, what to look for. We're looking at, when I say non-intrusive moves, we're looking at some big data things that are out there that are public that we could look at that would help us with that. So that's kind of what we're doing. So last question, who's got it? We're people. And that means we're flawed. I will say that the couple things that I think we're doing in DoD that help that, while we've upped the training, the other thing we had to do in DOD, and still recognizing people are flawed, is we have begun to develop a culture of what I'll call electronic information culpability and responsibility. So many of you know we've started the cyber scorecard. One of the things that we're measuring now, and what we've come up with a term, and the guy that gets credit for this term, some of you may know him, he just retired as the J6, was Mark Bowman. And he came up with the term negligent electronic discharge. Now, if that sounds a lot like a weapon, it was meant to. While people can make mistakes with weapons, we don't tolerate those. We give you lots of training on how to handle that weapon, and if you make a mistake, there are generally consequences that you must pay. Our policies now on electronic negligence mirror where they should those of weapons policy that says, listen, if you've been trained and you make a mistake, there's consequences. You make a mistake first time and it was a minor mistake, minimum consequences. You make a mistake the second time after you've been trained, there are some fairly significant, just like with the weapons, consequences. We are, as much as we're building the culture of understanding about cyber and everything else, we also are building a culture of cyber responsibility. I will tell you that's one of the things that I think I'm most happy with about that. Internationally, as I travel, I will tell you most of the companies that we have seen are adopting entirely or in big parts our cyber scorecard, and most of them are adopting our cyber culture plan. I think there's a shared commonality that says you've got to do that. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. Hope it was somewhat entertaining, and good luck and safe travels. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lieutenant General Bob Wood, Executive Vice President for AFCEA International, to thank Mr. Halvorsen.
Before we allow Mr. Halvorsen to take his seat, I do want to thank you on behalf of the people attending, but as well, I'd like a hearty thanks to you for helping AFCEA in its mission set. I would tell you that Secretary Halvorsen has gone from Australia to DC and back to here for this presentation. He's found the time always to provide his time, talent, and insights to AFCEA, to audiences we serve, and the mission we achieve. So thank you so much for that. I'd like to present a coin on behalf of the Hawaii chapter, on behalf of the AFCEA International, and on behalf of this crowd for really providing. I've seen more notes taken in this presentation than I've seen throughout all 3 days. Everybody head down, taking notes. His evangelical zeal is something that we really admire, and I don't even think about transitions in the future. We hope you're here forever. Thank you very much.
Bob, thank you. I want to make one other point. I get thanked for these speeches all the time, and I don't minimize it. Bob, you know I appreciate it, but I do think I would be remiss if I didn't say, I come to AFCEA not because you get a lot out of this. I come to AFCEA because I'm pretty selfish in that respect. It's my mission time, I want something out of it. AFCEA gives me great returns, and the only reason it does is because all of you play. How many of you here are involved with any of the booths? Sponsored and whatever. Thank you, because I doubt if many times the people who labor in those booths, anybody, this is not, gets them a thank you. They take a while. So know that the booths, your attendance here is helping. We would not have made the changes in policies. I got very good advice from Secretary Grimes and others when I started. Listen to the people, listen to industry. We do listen, and we will not be where we want to be without the partnership between us getting better and better. Thank you.
At this time, Ms. Joy Hess, Chairman of the Board for AFCEA Hawaii Educational Foundation, Major General Dave Bryan, U.S. Army retired, and Jim Mueller, President of AFCEA Hawaii, will come forward to present the Leadership Forum certificates.
So while we're forming up our class, I just want to take a few minutes to, first of all, thank AFCEA International and especially the Hawaii chapter of AFCEA for bringing the Leadership Forum for the 4th year in a row to TNAP. This year, our class